Have you ever looked at someone and immediately decided who they were, what they could achieve, or what they deserved? In a world quick to judge based on appearance, accent, or address, true potential often hides beneath assumptions, waiting for the moment to shatter expectations. In Atlanta, Georgia, skyscrapers of glass and steel tower over neighborhoods where dreams fight to survive amid concrete and compromise. This city, a place where old Southern history meets new American ambition, tells a tale of two realities existing just blocks apart. In one world, executives discuss million-dollar deals over imported whiskey. In the other, families stretch paychecks and promises with equal determination. This is where our story unfolds, between these parallel universes, where Malik Turner, a black veteran who gave everything for his country, lives unnoticed at the margins, and where Harrison Merrick, a billionaire with the power to reshape entire city blocks, operates with the confidence of someone who believes he can measure a person's worth at a glance. Have you ever been dismissed before you could prove your value? Been overlooked because of how you look, where you're from, or what you appear to lack? The sting of that disregard connects us all, regardless of our circumstances. What neither Malik nor Harrison realizes is that beneath their surface-level encounter lies a revelation waiting to emerge, one that will challenge everything the powerful billionaire believes about success, innovation, and human potential. When their worlds finally collide, a secret emerges that doesn't just change Harrison's perception of one man, it transforms his understanding of an entire community he once deemed dispensable. This isn't just another story about prejudice overcome. It's about the extraordinary power hidden within those society too quickly forgets. When Malik Turner returned to Atlanta after 3 tours of duty, the weight of his combat medals felt hollow against the weight of reality. The Bronze Star and Purple Heart, recognitions of courage under enemy fire in Afghanistan, now rested in a worn wooden box beside his bed in a 1-bedroom apartment where the ceiling fan worked only at certain speeds and the pipes groaned each morning in protest. Morning routines for Malik began at 5 a.m. Military precision never left him. 20 push-ups, despite the pain in his left shoulder where shrapnel remained embedded too close to nerves for doctors to remove. A cold shower when the building's water heater failed. Breakfast, instant coffee, and whatever was on discount at the corner store. His uniform these days, faded jeans, clean but well-worn button-ups, and the boots he'd purchased with his first civilian paycheck. "Thank you for your service," people would say when they learned of his military background, words that floated away on the same breath that denied him interviews for positions he was qualified for. The promised benefits and opportunities seemed to vanish when faced with his zip code, his appearance, his reality. Yet dignity radiated from Malik like heat from pavement. He never slumped his shoulders, never allowed bitterness to corrupt his interactions. Each no was met with the same resolve that had carried him through firefights and desert storms. A nod, a thank you for your time, and eyes already focused on the next possibility. At the East Atlanta Community Center, Malik coordinated veteran support meetings 3 evenings a week. The pay barely covered his bus fare, but the purpose it provided was currency of another kind. Between these sessions, he picked up work where he could. Helping elderly neighbors with repairs, unloading trucks at the wholesale market before dawn, occasionally filling in as security at local events. "You served with honor," Malik would tell younger veterans at the center, "now serve with purpose." His calm voice carried the authority of someone who had walked through fire and emerged focused on rebuilding, rather than lamenting the burns. His apartment told the story his resume couldn't. Military corners on a bed that had seen better days. A bookshelf assembled from crates and reclaimed wood, lined with military history, community organization manuals, and notebooks filled with his precise handwriting. Ideas for programs, contact information for resources, names of people who might need help. A small table held a laptop with a cracked corner, purchased secondhand and maintained with meticulous care. On his refrigerator, a single photo, Malik in uniform, arm around his son Trevon at his high school graduation. Both men stood tall, eyes bright with promise and determination. Beside it, Trevon's college acceptance letter, perhaps Malik's proudest achievement, The sacrifices, the overlooked applications, the nights spent hungry so his son could have books, all worth it for that single document that represented possibility. In a city that often failed to see his worth, Mullik Turner remained unbroken, unbowed, and unfinished with his contribution to a world that had yet to recognize what he still had to offer. Harrison Merrick viewed Atlanta from the 40th floor of a gleaming tower that bore his name, a vantage point he believed he'd earned through sheer force of will. His morning rituals included a personal chef preparing protein-rich breakfasts, a trainer who worked around his schedule, and meetings that determined the fate of city blocks with the casual ease of moving chess pieces. Efficiency is everything, Harrison often declared to his executive team. Sentiment is expensive. This philosophy had transformed a modest real estate inheritance into a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning luxury condominiums, commercial developments, and technology investments. At 52, Harrison's salt and pepper hair and tailored suits projected the authority his bank accounts confirmed. The latest project dominating his calendar. Renaissance Atlanta, a $1.2 billion development planned for the Eastern District where property values remained low enough to ensure substantial returns. The glossy proposal showcased gleaming structures of glass and concrete, upscale shopping destinations, and exclusive residences. Nowhere in the 60-page presentation appeared the faces of those currently occupying that space. These neighborhoods have been declining for decades, Harrison explained during stakeholder meetings. We're bringing economic revitalization to areas that desperately need investment. The translation, understood by all in attendance, those communities were obstacles to overcome, not partners to engage. When community representatives requested meetings, Harrison delegated these interactions to junior associates. When petitions arrived with hundreds of signatures, they were processed by his legal department. The concerns of residents, many who had called these neighborhoods home for generations, were reduced to PR challenges in project timelines. Some people resist progress because they fear change, Harrison remarked during a business roundtable. But markets don't respond to fear, they respond to vision. His definition of vision, however, extended only to profit margins, completion timelines, and property values. Success meant expansion. Progress meant replacement, rather than evolution. During a rare drive through the neighborhoods, his plans would transform. Harrison barely registered the community centers, family businesses, or gathering spots that anchored these areas. Through his windshield, he saw only underutilized land and missed opportunities, blank canvases awaiting his improvements. What happens when someone who measures life in dollars meets someone who measures it in duty? When ambition collides with dignity. When a man who sees communities as commodities encounters those who view neighborhoods as extensions of their souls. The answer would soon shatter every assumption in Harrison Merrick's carefully ordered world. The East Atlanta Cultural Center buzzed with nervous energy. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows filled quickly with residents whose homes and businesses sat in the crosshairs of Harrison Merrick's development plans. Hand-painted banners reading "Our Neighborhood, Our Future" hung alongside community quilts and local artwork that chronicled decades of resilience. Harrison arrived 15 minutes late, flanked by 2 assistants, who immediately began documenting his presence with professional cameras. His appearance, calculated down to the carefully loosened tie and rolled-up sleeves, was designed to project approachability while maintaining authority. The public relations team had prepared talking points emphasizing community partnership and shared prosperity, phrases that would look excellent in press releases but carried little substance in execution plans. "I'm here to listen," Harrison announced to the community leaders who greeted him, though his eyes continually darted to his watch and phone. Malik sat in the 3rd row, hands folded in his lap, posture straight despite the uncomfortable plastic chair. He'd arrived early to help elderly neighbors find seats, a small act of service that spoke volumes about his character. Unlike those who approached Harrison with urgent pleas or pointed questions, Malik observed, measured, and waited. The meeting progressed predictably. Community concerns met with polished corporate responses. Harrison's team presented renderings of green spaces and promised job opportunities, while carefully avoiding questions about affordable housing and displaced businesses. As the scheduled program neared its conclusion, the moderator announced, "We have time for one final presentation from a local resident." A young man rose from beside Malik and made his way to the makeshift stage. Something in Malik's eyes changed, pride and anticipation replacing his usual stoic expression. The young man connected his laptop to the projector with hands that betrayed a slight tremor. Harrison checked his email, barely glancing up as the screen illuminated with what appeared to be complex data visualizations. "My name is Trevon Turner," the young man began, his voice gaining confidence with each word. "And I'd like to show you something that will change how we think about community development forever. What would you do if you discovered that someone you dismissed held the key to your future success? How would your perspective shift if brilliance emerged from the very community you'd undervalued?" Watch closely as the moment of truth unfolds. Trevon Turner stood before the community in a simple button-down shirt and glasses that had been repaired with electrical tape at the temple. At 24, his youthful face contrasted with eyes that held the depth of someone who had seen both struggle and possibility. Few in the room knew him beyond Malik's boy, the quiet kid who'd earned a scholarship to Georgia Tech and kept to himself. "For 3 years, Trevon began, his voice soft but steady, "I've been developing a system while working from our apartment kitchen table, often late into the night after my job at the tech support center." His presentation shifted to photos. Trevon hunched over textbooks under a single lamp, code-filled notebooks stacked beside a plate of forgotten food, his workspace evolving from borrowed community center computers to a refurbished laptop Malik had purchased by taking extra security shifts. "Limited resources breed creative solutions," Trevon continued. "When traditional paths aren't available, you forge new ones." The screen changed to a dynamic interface, pulsing with color-coded data points mapped across a familiar grid of Atlanta neighborhoods. The room quieted as Trevon clicked through layers of information: employment patterns, transportation access, healthcare availability, educational outcomes, small business sustainability rates. "This is Nexus," Trevon explained. "It's an adaptive community resource algorithm that identifies not just current needs, but predicts future ones, based on multiple socioeconomic factors." Harrison's phone lowered as Trevon demonstrated how the program could optimize public transportation routes based on employment centers, pinpoint ideal locations for healthcare facilities, and identify vulnerable businesses before they failed. "Traditional development models focus on replacement," Trevon said, his confidence growing. "Nexus focuses on enhancement and integration. It proves that community preservation and economic growth aren't opposing forces. They're complementary ones." The technical brilliance became apparent as Trevon revealed that his algorithm processed thousands of data points hourly, learning and adapting to new information. Even more impressive was its application. Nexus could generate specific investment strategies that yielded both community benefits and financial returns. "With Nexus, we can identify which businesses in this neighborhood would thrive with modest capital injections," Trevon demonstrated, highlighting several locations on the map. "We can determine where affordable housing creates the most economic stability. We can calculate the exact educational supports needed to build a sustainable workforce." Harrison leaned forward, his expression shifting from polite boredom to intense focus. When Trevon pulled up comparison projections, Renaissance Atlanta versus a Nexus-optimized development plan, the numbers told a compelling story. The Nexus model showed comparable financial returns, but with dramatically improved community outcomes and significantly reduced displacement. "Mr. Merrick's vision for Renaissance Atlanta isn't wrong," Trevon concluded, meeting Harrison's gaze directly for the first time. "But it's incomplete. With Nexus, we can achieve economic growth while preserving the soul of our neighborhoods. Not just because it's right, because it's smart business." The room erupted in applause while Harrison remained motionless, his worldview visibly shaken. His assistants whispered urgently in his ear, but he waved them away, eyes locked on the screen where his carefully crafted plans had just been transformed into something both foreign and compelling. In that moment, Harrison Merrick, a man accustomed to being the smartest person in any room, realized he had gravely underestimated not just Trevon Turner, but an entire community. Harrison Merrick remained in his seat long after the community meeting concluded, watching as residents surrounded Trevon with questions and congratulations. The billionaire's mind, typically focused on acquisition strategies and profit projections, now raced through uncomfortable territory. How had he missed this? More troubling, what else had he overlooked by dismissing entire communities as obstacles rather than incubators of innovation? When the crowd thinned, Harrison approached Malik, who stood quietly beside his son with the composed dignity that came from expecting nothing while deserving everything. "Mr. Turner," Harrison said, extending his hand with uncharacteristic uncertainty, "your son's work is remarkable." Malik's handshake was firm, his eyes level. "Trevon has always seen possibilities others miss. I'd like to discuss potential collaboration," Harrison continued. "The Nexus system could revolutionize our approach to urban development." "Interesting," Malik replied, his tone measured. "Yesterday, my calls to your office went unanswered. Today, you see value in what we offer." The comment landed like a physical blow. Harrison, unused to direct challenges, found himself without a practiced response. In the uncomfortable silence that followed, he noticed the framed photographs lining the community center walls. Black men in military uniforms spanning decades of American conflicts. "You served," Harrison said, gesturing toward a small pin on Malik's collar. "Afghanistan. 3 tours. The transition back must have been challenging." A flicker of surprise crossed Malik's face at the genuine inquiry. "Challenge isn't new to black veterans. My father came home from Vietnam to find the country he defended wouldn't defend his right to buy a home in certain neighborhoods. My grandfather returned from World War II to discover his combat experience qualified him for janitorial positions. My experience was consistent with tradition." Harrison's gaze moved between the historical photos and Malik's weathered face, suddenly seeing connections between policies, patterns, and personal struggles that his privileged perspective had allowed him to ignore. "The Renaissance Project," Harrison began, then paused, reconsidering his words. "I've approached development as conquest rather than collaboration. I see that now." "Seeing is the beginning," Malik responded. "Action determines whether that vision matters." As they spoke, Trevon continued demonstrating his system to community members, his innovation born directly from the challenges Harrison had dismissed as irrelevant to progress. "What would you do if everything you believed about success and value was suddenly proven incomplete? If the metrics you'd used to measure worth were revealed to be fundamentally flawed? If you discovered that brilliance flourishes even in places you've been taught to dismiss?" Harrison Merrick stood at this crossroads, his carefully constructed worldview crumbling beneath the weight of undeniable evidence. The transformation between Harrison Merrick and the Turner family began with a series of meetings, first formal, with attorneys present, then increasingly collaborative, as mutual respect took root. Within 3 weeks, Harrison established the East Atlanta Innovation Fund with a $10 million initial investment, appointing Malik to co-chair the Oversight Committee. "We're redefining success metrics," Harrison announced at the press conference, the media stunned by his partnership with the modest veteran they'd never seen in boardrooms. "Financial returns matter, but community stability and inclusive prosperity are equally valuable outcomes." Harrison's actions spoke louder than his evolving rhetoric. Renaissance Atlanta underwent a complete redesign, incorporating Nexus data to preserve historical landmarks, strengthen existing businesses, and create genuine affordable housing. The development team, once exclusively comprised of outside executives, now included local leaders who brought generational knowledge to planning sessions. For Trevon, the partnership elevated his creation from theoretical model to practical application. Tech incubator space provided by Merrick Enterprises allowed him to expand his team, hiring engineers from overlooked neighborhoods and historically black colleges. Government agencies and development firms across the country began implementing Nexus, with each success further validating the brilliance that had emerged from a kitchen table in East Atlanta. Innovation doesn't require privilege, only perspective. Trevon explained during a TED Talk that garnered millions of views. Sometimes limitations foster creativity that abundance never could. Perhaps the most profound change came from Malik. The veterans support program he'd nurtured on a shoestring budget expanded into a comprehensive resource center, supporting hundreds of former service members with employment pathways, housing assistance, and healthcare navigation. Community members who had once nodded politely now sought his counsel, recognizing that his quiet dignity had concealed extraordinary wisdom and perseverance. At the groundbreaking ceremony for the Veterans Center, Malik stood at the podium, uncomfortable with attention but committed to the moment's importance. "Change begins when we truly see each other," he said simply. "Not as obstacles or stereotypes, but as humans with unique gifts to offer." When was the last time you completely changed your mind about someone? What happened when you discovered value in a person or place you'd previously dismissed? The courage to recognize when we're wrong might be the most powerful force for positive change in our world today. 2 years after Trevon's presentation, East Atlanta blossomed into a model of inclusive development. The neighborhood retained its cultural identity while welcoming new infrastructure, businesses, and residents. Property values increased without displacing longtime inhabitants, a balance previously thought impossible in urban development. Harrison's business philosophy underwent a fundamental shift. Merrick Enterprises now required community impact assessments for all projects, with profitability measured alongside accessibility, sustainability, and cultural preservation. Other developers initially criticized this approach as idealistic, until quarterly reports demonstrated that integrated communities outperformed segregated ones in long-term economic stability. "The strongest investments strengthen everyone" became Harrison's new mantra at business conferences where he once preached ruthless efficiency. Trevon's Nexus technology evolved into an essential planning tool across multiple industries. His company, Turner Innovations, employed over 50 people, many from neighborhoods previously written off as unproductive. Major universities invited him to lecture on ethical technology and community-centered design, while venture capital firms competed to fund his expanding vision. Perhaps most meaningful was the healing that occurred across generational divides. The Veterans Center Malik directed became a place where the sacrifices of Black service members received long-overdue recognition. Historical injustices were acknowledged through memorial spaces, educational programs, and policy advocacy that extended far beyond Atlanta. At a community celebration marking the completion of the first development phase, elderly residents who had witnessed decades of broken promises stood alongside newcomers, attracted by the neighborhood's innovative approach. Children played in parks where vacant lots once stood, while local entrepreneurs welcomed customers to businesses that had been preserved rather than replaced. The partnership between a billionaire, a veteran, and a visionary demonstrated that progress needn't come at the expense of people, and that the most powerful innovations often emerge from those with the most compelling reasons to create change. In a world quick to categorize people based on appearance, background, or circumstance, true brilliance often hides in plain sight. Harrison Merrick discovered this truth when he finally looked beyond his assumptions and recognized the extraordinary potential in those he had previously dismissed. The story of Malik and Trevon Turner reminds us that innovation flourishes everywhere, sometimes most powerfully in places where necessity demands creative solutions. Their journey challenges us to question: how often do we overlook excellence because it doesn't arrive in expected packages? What brilliance might we discover if we expanded our definition of value? Those who continue forward despite being underestimated carry a unique strength. Malik maintained his dignity through decades of dismissal, his quiet persistence creating space for his son's genius to emerge. His story honors countless others who serve, sacrifice, and contribute to communities that fail to recognize their worth. True progress happens when we acknowledge our blind spots and recalibrate our vision, when we recognize that potential and intelligence exist in every community, waiting only for opportunity to flourish. Has someone ever discovered your hidden talents after initially dismissing you? Or have you misjudged someone only to later recognize their exceptional qualities? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help others recognize the unseen potential around them. Subscribe to Black Narratives for more stories that challenge perspectives and celebrate overlooked excellence. Next week, we'll explore how a forgotten neighborhood in Detroit transformed educational outcomes through community wisdom that experts had ignored for decades. The most powerful changes begin when we truly see each other.